Ethan Cole's tires screeched against the wet, rain-slicked asphalt as the storm intensified. He could barely see beyond the windshield, the relentless downpour turning the streets of San Francisco into a blurred smear of streetlights and shadows. The city felt far away, its noise and energy drowned by the howling wind and sheets of rain. His hands tightened on the wheel, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, though he wasn't entirely sure where it was leading him. His phone, silent and unused in the passenger seat, reminded him of the people he had left behind, of the calls he had ignored, the messages he had deleted. They could wait. He didn't want to talk. Not to anyone. The memories were suffocating enough. Then, in the midst of his thoughts, he saw it. The mansion. A towering structure of crumbling stone and faded grandeur, it loomed on the edge of the road like a forgotten ghost from another time. The sign was barely visible, covered in ivy and decades of neglect, but he didn't need it. He knew this place. Something inside him urged him to stop, to step inside. The headlights of his car flickered as he pulled up to the driveway, and a cold shiver crawled up his spine. The mansion seemed to inhale the storm, drawing in the wet, heavy air. The building appeared abandoned, but there was something strange about it. Something that called to him. He turned off the engine, letting the car's silence wrap around him. He took a deep breath, and his thoughts suddenly swirled, whispers of a past he couldn't escape. The mansion was here, and maybe, just maybe, it could help him forget. The innkeeper was a woman of few words, her voice barely more than a whisper as she handed him a brass key. She didn't even look up from the old, yellowed papers on the desk. Her eyes were like two empty voids, haunted by years of solitude. Ethan muttered a thank you and made his way up the stairs, feeling the weight of the house settle on his shoulders. The old wooden staircase creaked underfoot, its echo strangely loud in the oppressive silence. As he reached the second floor, the air grew colder, and the walls seemed to close in, narrowing the hallway until only room 6 stood before him. The door opened with a groan, revealing a space frozen in time. The room smelled of dust and old, faded memories, like it hadn't been used in years, maybe even decades. A large wooden bed sat against the far wall, its sheets stained yellow with age. A cracked mirror hung above a dresser, its surface smudged with dust and fingerprints. Ethan set his bags down on the bed and ran a hand through his wet hair, wiping away the rain. The storm raged outside, but it felt distant now. The room, though, was still. Too still. It was as if the house had swallowed every sound, leaving only the soft patter of rain and the occasional groan of the old wood. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching him. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was gentle at first, like someone hesitant, afraid to disturb him. Ethan froze, his hand hovering over the doorknob. Who could it be? The innkeeper had given him no indication of anyone else in the house, and the hallway outside was empty. He glanced around the room, but there was no sign of movement. The air felt thicker now, like a suffocating weight pressing down on his chest. The knocking came again, louder this time, insistent. Ethan opened the door, but there was no one there. The hallway was empty, save for the shadowed corners and the faint glint of moonlight through the windows. The air was damp and cool, and the smell of wet earth clung to everything. He stepped out into the hallway, glancing down both directions. But all he saw was darkness. Except for the piece of paper on the floor. He bent down, his fingers trembling as he picked it up. It was a small scrap, the handwriting neat and deliberate. "You shouldn't be here." His heart skipped a beat. He stood frozen, the words swimming in his head. Someone had written this. Someone had been waiting for him. As he stood there, confused, the wind howled outside, and the house groaned with the force of it. Something was wrong. Something had been wrong the moment he stepped foot inside. Ethan's eyes darted up the hallway. And that's when he saw her. A figure stood at the far end of the corridor. She was tall, impossibly thin, her face obscured by matted, dark hair. She wore a white gown, its hem dirty and torn as if it had been dragged through the mud. Her pale skin shimmered in the dim light of the hallway. But it was her eyes, wide and empty, that froze him in place. She was watching him. staring at him, unblinking. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His body tensed, but his feet wouldn't move. He wanted to run, but his legs felt like lead. His chest tightened as the woman took a step toward him. And then, another. The wind rattled the windows as if urging him to act, but he couldn't tear his gaze away. The figure drifted closer, her feet never touching the ground. Suddenly, she disappeared, swallowed by the shadows of the hallway. Ethan blinked, his heart pounding in his chest. The hallway was empty. He glanced around, but there was no sign of the woman, nothing but darkness. He closed the door, locking it behind him. His hands were shaking now, and his breath was coming in short bursts. Was he losing his mind? Had the storm and the isolation gotten to him? He didn't know. But he needed to sleep. The mirror above the dresser had caught his attention earlier, but now, it felt like it was watching him. It seemed out of place, as though it didn't belong in the room at all. The glass was cloudy and scratched, but in the dim light, it reflected everything, every corner, every shadow, like an unwelcome observer. Ethan turned away, but the mirror seemed to pull at him, beckoning him closer. His feet moved of their own accord, his mind swimming in a haze of fear and confusion. He stared into the glass. His reflection looked the same, his tired eyes, the dark stubble on his face, the ragged jacket. But the shadows in the room were wrong. Too deep, too dark. And in the mirror, they seemed to shift, to move, as if they were alive. Ethan stepped back, his pulse hammering. What the hell was happening? The room was silent again, but the whispers began. At first, the whispers were soft, like a breeze rustling the leaves. But soon they grew louder, more insistent, as though voices were rising from the floorboards. They seemed to come from every direction, surrounding him. "Help me! Help me!" The words sent a shiver through his spine. His eyes darted around the room. No one was there. Just the empty bed, the dusty dresser, the cracked mirror. But the voices continued. "Please, help me." Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block out the sound, but it only grew louder. The voices were in his head now. They weren't coming from the room. They were inside him. Inside his mind. "You have to help her, Ethan," the voice whispered. His pulse raced. He opened his eyes and looked around again, but this time, something was different. In the reflection of the mirror, he saw her. The woman in white. Her face was pale, but now, her eyes were filled with sorrow, an endless well of sorrow. Her mouth opened, and the words came again. "You killed me." Ethan stumbled backward, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. His heart raced. The woman in white had never left. She was in the mirror. She was in his mind. The reflection blurred as his eyes filled with tears. He blinked, but the image of the woman in the gown grew clearer, more defined. She wasn't just a reflection anymore. She was alive. Real. Ethan shook his head, desperate to deny it, but the truth was in the mirror. "You killed me," she repeated. The voice echoed in his mind, louder now. His body felt heavy, as though the room itself were pulling him into the glass. The door creaked behind him. He turned to find the hallway empty again, but it didn't matter. He could feel her presence, like a cold hand against his spine. She was there. The woman. The ghost of his past. Her voice had changed now, colder. More accusing. "You killed me, Ethan. You murdered me in cold blood. And now you will pay." Ethan turned away, but he could still hear her. Her voice filled the room, drowning out his own thoughts. His knees buckled beneath him, and he collapsed onto the bed. He couldn't escape her. The guilt, the shame, the memories, everything he had tried to bury, had come back to life. The past had caught up with him, and now, there was no way out. The truth was simple. Ethan had killed her. Sarah. He had murdered her in a blind rage, never once considering the consequences. "You killed me, Ethan," she said, standing in the doorway now, her eyes burning with fury. "And now I will make you suffer for it." Her voice was chilling, But it was the truth. The horrifying, undeniable truth. Ethan couldn't run from it anymore. He couldn't hide. The storm outside raged harder now, the wind howling through the cracks in the old house. But inside, everything was still. Silent. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as the room began to darken, the shadows growing longer, wrapping around him like a suffocating blanket. He couldn't breathe. The last thing he saw was Sarah's face, twisted with rage. And then, everything went black. I had always loved the quiet. My parents, though kind-hearted, were social creatures who often hosted gatherings, inviting friends over and filling our home with loud chatter. I hated it. It left me exhausted and drained. So, when they told me they were going out for dinner, I was beyond happy. I got to stay home, alone. The feeling of peace that night was unmatched. The rain pattering on the roof, the gentle hum of the TV, and the rustling leaves outside the window were enough to lull me into a sleepy trance. Even Daisy, my small poodle, seemed content as she lay at the foot of my bed. It was a strange kind of night, one where time seemed to slip away, like a gentle river that carried you along without you even realizing. I wasn't tired, but I wasn't fully awake either. Somewhere between waking and sleeping, I began to drift off. The sound of the door creaking open was so subtle that I almost ignored it. Houses make noises, after all. It could have been anything, settling floorboards, the wind, or maybe even the rain against the windows. But this was different. I heard it again, slower this time, more deliberate. Something, or someone, was coming in. At first, I thought it was Daisy. It wasn't unusual for her to push open the bedroom door when she was feeling needy, looking for attention, or simply wanting to curl up beside me. So, when I felt a sudden weight on the bed, I didn't think twice. I reached out, instinctively running my fingers through soft fur. But it didn't feel like Daisy. It was far too soft, far too silky. My hand kept traveling along the length of whatever this thing was, and that's when I realized the depth of my mistake. Daisy's fur wasn't this long. My dog was small, and her coat was curly, not this smooth, unearthly softness. My stomach twisted. I pulled my hand back, trying to make sense of the growing dread that was spreading inside me like wildfire. The air had changed in the room. It felt heavier now, colder. The calm that had been present moments before was now replaced by a sharp, gnawing fear. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. I had to be imagining things. But the more I thought about it, the less logical that seemed. What kind of animal was this? I didn't dare open my eyes, but the sense of something, or someone, staring at me was overwhelming. The weight on my bed shifted, and I felt the presence grow closer, encroaching on my space. Whatever it was moving slowly, almost deliberately, as if it had all the time in the world. I should have screamed. I should have shouted for help, but I couldn't. My body was frozen, every part of me trapped in a state of paralysis. I couldn't bring myself to even open my eyes. And then I heard it. A soft, slow breath. Almost imperceptible, but it was there. The air was thick, suffocating, and then came another sound, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The softest whisper of a voice, cold and calm, floated to my ears. "Don't be afraid." But it wasn't reassuring. It was chilling. I opened my eyes, just slightly, afraid of what I would see. And when I did, my heart almost stopped. There, sitting at the edge of my bed, was a woman. At least, she looked like a woman. But there was something about her, something about the way she sat still, motionless, that made her presence utterly unnatural. Her golden hair glowed in the dim light, shimmering like sunlight on a still lake, and her skin was so pale it looked almost ethereal. But it was her eyes, those sharp, piercing green eyes, that held me captive. I couldn't look away. They were so intense, so full of something dark that I couldn't quite understand. Her lips parted, revealing sharp, glistening fangs. I felt my breath hitch. This was not a human. This was something far worse. Something otherworldly. She smiled then, a slow, unsettling smile. The kind of smile you'd expect from a hunter, a predator who knows they've trapped their prey. The smile stretched wider, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said, her voice like honey dripping from a poisoned cup. But I didn't believe her. How could I? She was going to hurt me, wasn't she? What was she? Some kind of creature? A vampire? The longer she stayed there, the more unnatural everything about her felt. I was shaking, but I couldn't move. My mind screamed for me to run, to get up and flee, but my body refused to listen. I was caught in her gaze. Trapped. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. All I could manage was a soft, shaky whisper. "Who are you?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she tilted her head, considering me as if I were some strange curiosity she had never encountered before. Then she spoke, her voice a silky whisper that seemed to echo in my mind. "I'm someone you'll never forget." Her words sent a shiver through my spine. I wanted to run, to scream, but something held me in place. The vampire's face was now inches from mine. Her cold breath tickled my skin, and I could feel her presence pressing down on me like a heavy weight. She didn't blink, didn't move, didn't speak. She was like a statue, too still, too perfect. And then she leaned in. I could feel her lips almost grazing my ear as she whispered, "Don't scream. You wouldn't want to make me angry." At that moment, everything in me screamed for me to fight back. Without thinking, I scrambled out of the bed, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I was running on pure instinct now, my body moving faster than I thought possible. But the vampire was already there, blocking my way, her eyes glowing with malevolent amusement. "You can't escape," she purred. Her voice was soft, but each word felt like a dagger piercing my chest. I didn't know what else to do. My mind was racing. Escape. Run. Fight back. Do something. I grabbed the first thing I could find, a knife from the kitchen, and held it up in trembling hands. "Stay back," I managed to say, trying to sound braver than I felt. The vampire just smiled, her sharp fangs flashing. "You think that will stop me?" she taunted. I lunged at her, the knife raised, slashing at the air in front of me. The blade barely grazed her skin, but she didn't flinch. She didn't move. Instead, she simply stared at me with that cold, predatory smile. I swung the knife again, this time with more force, but once again, she sidestepped with ease, faster than I could even process. My breath came in short gasps. My hands were slick with sweat, the knife slipping in my grip. I tried to strike again, but she grabbed my wrist with one hand, twisting it so hard that the knife nearly fell from my grasp. "You're so weak," she whispered, her grip tightening. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All I could focus on was the coldness of her touch and the icy terror creeping into my bones. I had no choice left. My survival instincts kicked into high gear, and I did the only thing I could think of. I drove the knife into her chest, with every ounce of strength I could muster. The impact was sickening, and I expected her to collapse. But she didn't. She barely flinched. Her eyes narrowed, and her lips curled into a sinister grin. "You think you've won?" she asked, her voice low, filled with venom. I was desperate. I had to do something, anything, to get her away from me. I slashed again, aiming for her throat. This time, I felt the blade sink into her flesh. But once again, she didn't bleed. There was no reaction. She didn't fall. It was then I realized, this wasn't a battle I could win with mere steel. Her growl was guttural, animalistic. The sound sent waves of terror through my body, and I stumbled backward. She began to walk toward me, slowly, deliberately. The smile on her face had disappeared, replaced by a terrifying snarl. Her eyes, those bright green eyes, were full of fury. The last ounce of my hope disappeared. I couldn't outrun her, couldn't fight her. I was no match for this creature. But then, in a split second, I swung the knife one final time, driving it toward her heart. Her scream was deafening. I closed my eyes, not wanting to witness whatever horror was about to unfold. But when I opened them, she was gone. Vanished into thin air. The only thing left in her place was a single strand of golden hair lying on the floor. I was left standing, trembling, my heart pounding in my chest. Had I killed her? Had I scared her off? Or was this only temporary? In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still out there. I'd hear noises in the house, whispers, the sound of soft footsteps in the dark. The air always felt colder at night, and I could never quite bring myself to sleep without the lights on. Sometimes, I'd catch a glimpse of something in the corner of my vision, golden hair, or a fleeting shadow. She was still watching. And I knew it was only a matter of time before she came back. It was a rainy night, and the road ahead stretched out like a ribbon of darkness. My cousin, always the dedicated trucker, had her grip firmly on the steering wheel of her rig. A cup of coffee rested in the cup holder, its warmth offering a slight comfort against the cold, damp night. The truck's headlights cut through the gloom, revealing the winding path of US 70 in Greensboro, North Carolina. The rain was heavy, and the air was thick with the sound of water beating on the truck's windshield. She didn't mind the isolation of the night drives. It gave her time to think. The road was empty, almost eerily so, and the hum of the engine was oddly soothing, until her eyes caught something ahead. A figure stood by the side of the road. She had to blink a few times, unsure if she was seeing things. A young woman in a white evening dress, completely out of place, stood in the pouring rain. The dress was elegant, and her appearance almost ethereal, yet her presence was an anomaly in the desolate, storm-ridden landscape. Her arms were outstretched as if she were desperately trying to flag someone down. My cousin slowed the truck, wondering if the woman needed help, though something felt off. Why was someone dressed so nicely, stranded out here in the middle of nowhere, in such awful weather? Compassion outweighed her doubt, and she pulled over. The young woman moved quickly, as though she had been waiting for the truck to arrive. She climbed into the cab with an air of urgency and settled beside my cousin without a word. The soft scent of perfume mixed with the rain, and the truck seemed suddenly warmer with the presence of this stranger. "My name is Lydia," the woman said softly, her voice gentle, but her eyes distant. "I was just at a dance, and now I'm just trying to get home. Here's my address." My cousin looked over at the piece of paper Lydia handed her and plugged the address into her GPS. It didn't seem too far away, maybe 20 minutes or so. She tried to engage her passenger in conversation, asking where the dance had been held and how she had gotten stranded in the first place, but Lydia didn't respond. She simply stared ahead, her hands folded in her lap. The drive continued in silence, with only the soft sound of the windshield wipers cutting through the rain. My cousin felt uneasy but chalked it up to the oddness of the situation. The storm, the late hour, and the strange encounter. She glanced over at Lydia a few times, hoping to break the silence, but the woman kept her eyes fixed on the road ahead, her lips pressed into a thin line. Eventually, my cousin offered a small, comforting smile. "You can rest if you need to," she said. "I'm sure all that dancing wore you out. It's a late hour, after all." Still, Lydia did not respond. The silence hung thick in the air. As the truck rumbled on, the rain grew heavier, the road slicker. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the GPS alerted her that they had arrived at the destination. My cousin glanced in the rearview mirror, noting the dimly lit house ahead, but something about the place made her uneasy. It was a large, old house, darkened by the storm and with an eerie stillness about it. She pulled the truck over, intending to help Lydia out and perhaps offer her a flashlight for the walk ahead. But as she turned to look at her passenger, ready to hand her the light, something inexplicable happened. The woman was gone. The seat beside her was empty, not even a trace of Lydia remained. My cousin was shocked, frozen in place as she stared at the empty space where Lydia had been just seconds ago. She hadn't heard the door open, no sounds of movement. One moment, Lydia was there, and the next, she had vanished without a trace. She quickly turned around, her heart pounding. She searched the cab, looking under the seats, checking the back of the truck. Nothing. Not a single sign that anyone had ever been there. The chill that ran down her spine was bone deep, and she sat there, staring into the dark night, trying to comprehend what had just happened. My cousin's mind raced as she sat alone in the truck, the rain still pouring down outside. She couldn't explain it. Had she imagined it all? But no, Lydia's presence had felt too real. The way she had sat there, the sound of her voice, the faint scent of perfume, everything had been real. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone and began typing. Lydia Ghost Hitchhiker Greensboro. She didn't expect much, but what she found left her reeling. There were several reports of a young woman named Lydia who had been seen hitchhiking along US 70. She had died in a car crash years ago, after attending a dance. Yet her spirit was still seen, still trying to find her way home, still unaware of her own death. The realization hit my cousin like a wave, and she felt the weight of the supernatural world shift in her understanding. The story she uncovered told of the tragic accident that had taken Lydia's life. She had been driving home from a dance, much like she had said. But she never made it home. Her car had collided with another vehicle, and she had died at the scene. Her spirit, however, was trapped. Every night, she appeared, wandering the same stretch of road, trying to make her way home, forever unaware of her own fate. My cousin shuddered as she looked at the GPS. The address Lydia had given her was in the same area where the accident had occurred. The eerie sense of déjà vu gnawed at her, and the chill in the air grew colder. The experience had shaken my cousin to her core. As a trucker, she had driven countless miles, passed many strangers, and encountered many strange sights, but this was different. It wasn't just a story or a fleeting moment, it was a reality she couldn't deny. She never spoke of the incident to anyone but me, but I could tell it had changed her. Her views on the paranormal, once skeptical and dismissive, were now transformed. She no longer looked at the night roads the same way, and every time she drove through Greensboro, she couldn't help but wonder if Lydia was still out there, waiting for someone to help her find her way home.